Hey, good morning. We are so glad that you are here this morning and hanging out with us during Advent. My name is Andrea Smith. I have the privilege of being the pastor here, and we're so grateful for you and that you're here and that you're sitting up front. I'm having some heart palpitations. I'm like, they must be visitors, so because nobody ever sits up front. So yay, kudos to you. Thank you. They appreciate the energy, right? And so do I. If you're worshiping with us online, the energy that you bring to the chat room is equally as important. I love seeing you sharing where you are. To our guest in Colorado this morning, kudos to you. And I love that you're out there and love that you are interacting with one another. So that's the part of community and what West is all about. If you're new to the West community and you'd like to find out more, we have a first-time guest or VIP guest station out front, and we'd love for you to stop by. Then I promise we're not going to inundate you. We're not going to show up at your door. We're not going to knock on it this afternoon. You can let us know how much you choose to hear from us or not at all, but we do have a gift that we'd like to share with you. Same with our online folks, or if you're listening to the podcast throughout the week and you're new to West, let us know. Send us an email. You can email info, I-N-F-O, at headingwest.org, or you can go to our website and let us know. But we'd like to know that you are a part of the community. We do some really cool things here. First of all, one of those things is going to be on Christmas Eve. We're having 2 services, just like we did last year. It was the first time we ever went to 2 services on Christmas Eve. We were wondering what that would be like, and both were very powerful and fun. So on Christmas Eve, it is a good time to invite friends that are not a part of church. They're not going to have an altar call. I'm not going to try to, win souls to Jesus at Christmas Eve. It is a safe environment for everyone. So invite your friends to either 5 or 7. We have great music and hopefully a meaningful message. So keep that on your radar. Also, next Sunday is a big Sunday in the life of West. We're going to have a small service in here first, so there will be a message, but then we have what we call a no huddles day. If you're newer to West, let me explain what that means. When we launched 15 years ago, we decided then that we wanted to be a church that broke out of the holy huddle. If you drive by a church on a Sunday morning, you see all these cars in the parking lot, and if you're someone that's not engaged in a church, it looks like it's a group of holy huddlers, like a football huddle. And then sometimes, not West, but sometimes you find that what do? Like when they break out of the holy huddle, do they have an impact? So we decided that we wanted to be a church that broke out of the holy huddle. And we want to do it on Sunday mornings to show that we mean what we say. And so next Sunday, we are going to wrap the Ding Dong Ditch gifts. And so excited about the families that are receiving the gifts this year. And some of them are our amped families. Others are folks that just need some extra love this Christmas. And so we're going to have a mini experience in here. And then out in the commons area, we're going to wrap gifts. So I really hope you'll make it a point to come next Sunday. Another really cool thing that has happened lately, if you're familiar, West has a nonprofit called Level Up Together. And a part of that nonprofit is this thing called Soul Creations. We started it a couple of years ago. It started really small. We made some candles, and now it's much bigger than that. We have a full booth at the Antique Mall Marinos near Barcelona and Alinos downtown. Someone gave us a shelf there a few years ago, and then they decided that our products sold more than theirs, so they gifted us and grandfathered us in. And I do want to say the management there, they love the Level Up and Soul Creations. They're always doing us favors, and they've done some really powerful things for us. So I am pushing that. I don't normally do that, but it goes into our missions. And so a couple of really, really powerful things have happened in the last couple of weeks. First of all, we ended the month of November, and Soul Creations sold $6,550 worth of product in November. And I want to thank all the volunteers that make that happen. The average price point of our stuff is $10. So I'll let you do the math. $10 into 6,000. That's a lot of diffusers and candles and that kind of stuff. So if you volunteer for Soul in any capacity, thank you. If you support Soul, thank you. Because it enables us to fund AMPed, the Back to School Bash, old for elementary, like we did a hurricane response candle. And so we had no idea, but we got another order this week and I had to write them because we were out of what they needed. And they said, well, I was at the governor's Christmas party last night and I got one of your candles as a gift. And I'm so impressed with how missional you all are. I wanted to order more. Now, for our candles to be, I don't care what political party you are, for our candles to be at the governor's Christmas party, that's a big deal. And so just some really cool things happening in our community. So I invite you to be a part of that. Today, we are talking about Am I a Grinch If? Our message series for Advent is looking in our lives and seeing if we're Grinch-like. And so today is going to be an interesting topic, perhaps a little touchy. Did you know that 1/3 of Americans have a no contact rule with someone in their family, in their close family? They have canceled their relationship with their family, at least 1/3 of Americans. It's an epidemic in our society. We're going to talk today about healthy boundaries. What are healthy boundaries that we can have in our relationships? And why sometimes when we follow Jesus, do we think that means we need to be a doormat? We're not called to be doormats, but we're also not called to be hurtful either. So we're going to look at that and decide what is Grinch-like and what isn't. I'm really glad that you're here, and I hope you find today meaningful and relevant as we continue worshiping together. Before I became the pastor of West, I was an associate pastor. And so in the United Methodist Church, which we are one of, the lead pastor or the senior pastor gets moved. If you're an elder in the United Methodist Church, the bishop and the cabinet, they decide, in conjunction with you and your governing body of the church, when you move. And so during my time at Williamson's Chapel, we had a mid-year move. Usually preachers in the Methodist Church move in June or July and start the new appointment in July. And so we had a mid-year move, which was pretty tumultuous actually for Williamson's Chapel at the time. The pastor that was there was very beloved, and his moving in October was sudden and unexpected, and it was equally as unsettling for the pastor that was moving in. His church, he had a large church up in the mountains, western part of North Carolina, and he was not expecting to be moved in October, and so there was just a lot of stuff, a lot of transition. He came in and we had a staff meeting, and he said, here's sort of what I need and what I expect. Usually, I get here somewhere between 7 and 8, and I have a no contact policy until 10 a.m. And we're like, what do you mean? And he's like, when my door is shut, don't come in. Like, don't knock. If my door's shut, I don't want you in here. Like, I need that time. And we were a little like, well, what if we need you? And he's like, if someone is dying, and I mean that literally, you can knock on my door, but other than that, don't bother me until 10 a.m. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, that's a little odd or a little harsh. But now that I'm responsible for weekly content, I see a little more from his perspective. You need that concentrated time. But it sat way better with the staff than it did with the church people, because they were used to having constant access to the pastor. And he's like, I am going to have boundaries. They're hard. They're hard to impose in our lives, and they're hard to have, and they're also hard to follow, especially if somebody else that we are in a relationship with has them. So this morning, especially in this, we live in this cancel culture. We cancel people. And I was shocked when I heard it was actually a podcast that Oprah did with some individuals, and a research study was done at Cornell University that showed that 1/3 of Americans have no contact with a family. They have said, do not contact me, I am done. This is a hard boundary. And when I started thinking about it and looking at our lives, and especially here in the holiday season, how many of you feel stressed right now? Will you clap? Okay, a good bit. I mean, hopefully we've learned to navigate that a little bit. The holidays are stressful, so we are going to talk about boundaries and healthy boundaries and look at some boundaries that appear in the Christmas story. We have this idea as followers of Jesus, if you are a follower of Jesus, and if you're not, this is a safe space for you. We're going to talk about what it means, but totally respect where you are coming from. But as followers of Jesus, we have this idea sometimes that anything goes. Like we're called to just be always open and generous and compassionate. And there's this thing actually called compassion fatigue. It's a real thing. You can be too compassionate sometimes, especially when it comes at the sacrifice of yourself. So this morning I want us to ask ourselves this question: am I a Grinch if? And then we're going to answer it as we talk about boundaries. Take a quick look at this video.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel, Mr. Grinch. You're a bad banana with a greasy black peel. You're a monster, Mr. Grinch. Your heart's an empty hole. Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch. I wouldn't touch you with a 39.5-foot pole.
Am I a Grinch if I need boundaries? We all need boundaries. There's nothing wrong with having them in our lives. So why do having boundaries make us feel so un-Jesus-like? Well, we follow this man, this human that also had full divinity, and he, in our stories, in our recollection of Jesus, he was always giving. But, you know, Jesus had boundaries too. And so it is okay if we put boundaries in our life. Having boundaries is actually not un-Jesus-like at all. In fact, the whole Christmas story is a story full of boundaries. So last week we talked about Mary and Joseph and what their life had to be like. You know, Mary's yes was actually a boundary placement on her life, because here's this young woman. She is more than our understanding of engaged to this man. She is basically in a committed, lawful relationship. She was betrothed to him. So they're already, truthfully, like in that culture, understood to be married. And she is with child. And an angel, which means messenger from God, comes to her and tells her this. And so last week we talked about how she said yes to God. But I want us to think about Mary's boundaries this morning. Mary's yes to God was actually a holy no to the societal expectations. Like, she was willing to go against being popular. She was willing to go against what society expected of her so that she could follow God. So where do you have that going on in your life? Where is a yes to something actually a no to something that can be considered holy? We sacrifice ourselves because we want to be liked. We want to please those that we love. We want to be perceived as good and kind. And so many times we do this, like I said, the compassion fatigue. We do it at the expense of ourselves. So when Mary said yes to God, she actually is saying no to other things that would not have been conducive to her, other relationships that would have been critical, and the scorn that she received. She was going against the guide of her family. They had to get on board with all this. None of this was what people had expected to happen with her, but yet she still does it. She knew who she was called to be in that moment, in that encounter with the angel, and so she was willing to say yes. Ask yourself, what are you saying yes to right now? And are you saying yes to the things that you want and need to say yes to? Or are you saying yes to things because you're trying to keep somebody else happy? Or are you saying yes to things because you don't want to disappoint someone else? You don't want to let them down? And how many times are we saying yes because we are afraid of the ramifications of saying no? How many times are we saying yes when we're afraid of the ramifications of saying no? If you can recall those instances in your life right now, then perhaps that's a situation where boundaries matter. As followers of the one who came and showed us how to love, just loving is enough. Loving does not mean we sacrifice ourselves, because if you do that over and over again, what's going to be left to give that love? Have you ever heard of the put on your oxygen mask first? If you've ever flown, it's one of the things they talk about. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help those that are around you. It's okay to have boundaries, and it's okay to let a yes actually be a no. Another place where we can find boundaries that we alluded to last week. And last week we talked about this is not what I signed up for. Mary and Joseph and their perspective in the Christmas story, like this is not how they thought their life was going to work out. Yet it happened and things happened, and God uses all things, no matter how hard or difficult the things are. God always is in all things and works all things, no matter how horrific, to give us some love, even though in the worst things it feels like we've been abandoned. So that's what we talked about last week. But Joseph, we touched on him last week. He drew some pretty hard boundaries. And the cool thing about Joseph is his boundary was between what the law allows and what love requires. That's also a boundary that Jesus lived out in his entire life. Like, that was the whole premise of his ministry. There were all these laws, over 630 Mosaic laws. And they followed them because they believed in them. And they followed them because they believed that they were going to help them get closer to God. So it regulated what they ate, what they wore, all this kind of stuff. And it's so funny. It's why we stopped doing TikTok as a church. Like, we had a TikTok channel and we would put snippets from the message, and I just couldn't handle the criticism there. I was like, I don't have the emotional bandwidth, because apparently my gender is still an issue in 2025. And the fact that we would put snippets of the songs. So, like, to sing Sweet Child of Mine in the Sundays of Advent, that's blasphemous. Like, you don't do that. And we're like, why? I mean, think about it. The words couldn't be more perfect for talking about this human that came in the form of a tiny baby. And this sweet child changed the world. Like, hopefully, when you hear that song again on the radio, you'll be like, oh my gosh, we sang that at church at Christmas, and it's about Jesus. But you know what? There's a ton of religious people who follow my TikTok that don't agree with that same stance. But Jesus already charted that path for us, and so did Joseph. The law said that he could have Mary killed. But there was a difference between what the law required and what love gave. And so he drew a hard line around the religious law. I'm not encouraging us at all to go break the government laws. You'll end up in jail. Not a fan of going to jail, so let's try to abide by those laws. But like religious laws, if they don't lead to love, I think they can always be examined and tried to figure out if they fit in with the way and the walk and the life of Jesus. It's why, as a church, our core value, the first one, is that all means all. All people are welcome and have been from day one and fully a part of our experience and who we are as a church, as a movement, as a community. And the second one is we follow the Jesus model, not the religious law model, but the Jesus model. If Jesus did it, we do it. If Jesus didn't do it, like the Apostles' Creed, there are chances, and that's, if you don't know what that is, I don't mean this ugly, and church people, please don't be offended, but you're not missing much. I mean, it's a creed, and like it's a bunch of words. I'm happy to talk about it with you, but like your life's not going to be richer at this stage of the game if you don't have that to fall back on. We follow the Jesus model. Jesus often went around the law or ignored the law if it meant loving people. I was all stressed out a few weeks ago. I had way too many things on my calendar and way too many commitments and demands that needed to be done, and I couldn't decide what to do. I have a coach. He preached here a few weeks ago, Pastor Scott Osterberg, and he is a gifted leader and someone that I respect. And so I was talking to him about balance, and I'm like, this is a week I can't get it all done. And I feel like I'm at that rope, and the rope is dangling, and I'm holding on a little. And I had a lot of meetings. And if you know me, you know I don't like meetings at all. And so there were too many that I didn't have any control over. And I was so worried if I didn't go to one of them that I was going to be a disappointment or let someone down. And he, in his wisdom, said, let me ask you something. Are you more worried about being successful, or are you more worried about being faithful? I'm like, Are you more worried about being successful and doing all the right things, trying to please people and get the check marks by your name? Or are you more worried about being faithful? I wish that my answer was, I'm worried about being faithful, but I wasn't. I was worried about getting the check marks by my name. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to impress people. I wanted to show up and be in the who's who. I didn't go to several meetings because I needed to have some boundaries around my time. I needed to put my time into the things that were being faithful, not successful. In a time of year when the next 2 to 3 weeks are going to just be jam-packed with stuff, what's driving you? What's driving your decision? Are you trying to people please? Or are you trying to be faithful? Faithful to who you are? Faithful to what is important to you? Something to consider. The other one that gets a bad rap in Scripture for having boundaries is the innkeeper. I've always been in the church, like from the time that I was born, so I've known the Christmas story forever, and I always would think about the innkeeper and be like, who would turn away Mary and Joseph? Who would turn away a very, very pregnant woman? But in studying for this, there was a different perspective that honestly never thought about before. The innkeeper's no room was not rejection. It was the truth. How many times have we not had room for something? one more task, one more meeting, one more commitment. How many times have we not had room for something, but because we are not able to put boundaries around our time, around our space, around our lives, around our emotional availability, we say, oh yeah, let's do that. I am so guilty of this, and I suspect that I'm not the only one. We're like, oh yeah, let me do one more thing. And then when it comes time to do the one more thing, chaos ensues. Because we think, oh, I can cram one more thing in. I mean, clearly the story worked out, right? Like Mary, Joseph, they found a safe space to have Christ, to have Jesus of Nazareth, who we know of as the Christ. Like, they found a safe space. Probably wasn't what you get over at the hospital in the maternity ward, but it worked out. Because here, a couple of thousand years later, we're still talking about it. So it was okay. So the innkeeper's no wasn't out of malice or out of any icky place. His no was just a reality. It is okay to live in reality. It is okay to say, I don't have time and space for this right now. It doesn't mean I don't want to, but it just means I can't. Boundaries name reality. And having them does not mean you're Grinch-like. Boundaries name a reality. So there's a story I want to share with you. We don't often read this part in the Christmas story because it's at the end of the story. But this morning I want to share with you from the Gospel of Matthew, and it's when the Magi, which are wisdom teachers, they visit the Messiah. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi, wisdom teachers from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where's the one who has been born the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Now, the governmental leader at the time was a ruthless leader. His name was King Herod. When he heard this, he was greatly disturbed, and all Jerusalem was with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." So Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." Now, if these guys are wisdom teachers, odds are, as soon as they heard him say, "I really want to go worship him too," they probably had a little clue that Herod didn't want to go worship him. Herod only worshiped Herod. But after they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it rose ahead of them, and they followed the star that they had seen when it rose ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another road. The Magi refused to give Herod access to the one that was coming to bring hope and peace and joy to the world. They were wisdom teachers. And wisdom protects what is holy. So where do you need to have wisdom? Where do you need to claim your wisdom in your life? It is okay to have boundaries, and it is okay to need to take a path that is not what you thought you bargained for. It is okay to state and claim what you need from all people. So Herod is what happens when power ignores boundaries. You've got this ruthless leader, and there's this place, if you go to the Holy Land where Herodia was built, he would build these castles on top of hills, and he built Herodium during the time of Jesus. And it was, if you go up there on the top of that mountain, you can look out and you can see all of the Holy Land off in the distance. That's what a power-hungry leader he was. Like, he even made them move the castle, the place that he lived, over another mountain. If you've ever heard the saying that Jesus said, if you have faith that can move mountains, it was referencing Herod, actually, because he moved mountains, literally. He had them move a mountain so his power and his kingdom could oversee everything. Jesus was using that as an analogy, saying if you believe it strong enough, you can do it. If you put your faith in the power that's stronger than you are. So here's Herod, and he's got all this power, and he's corrupt. Wisdom, however, goes around that. Remember I told you about the study that Cornell did where 1/3 of Americans are canceling out their family? I have lived that, actually, like when my dad, and if you're newer to West, you've not heard the story. If you've been around for a while, you have, so forgive the repeat. But the shortened version is when my dad got older, probably in his 80s, for the last 10 years of his life, he fell victim to senior adult fraud. My dad was a career military man, very independent, very stern. I'm an only child, and so he put my name on all of his bank accounts. And so and thank goodness he lived in a small town, and so they knew him. When he started taking out exorbitantly large amounts of money, they called me. I was on a youth mission trip, and they're like, you need to go ask your dad about his money. Do you ever look at the accounts? And I'm like, no, I can barely look at mine. I'm not going to look at my dad's. It's none of my business. And they're like, you need to go. And I was just astonished at what I found. He had given away already over $100,000, and it was bad. Now, remember, career military, okay, so stern human being, a master sergeant in the Army for years and years. And I loved him, but he treated me like I was one of his cadets or whatever they're called. He was a force to be reckoned with. But he was making drastically horrific decisions. I had to take him to court for guardianship. That didn't go well. And this was after pleading with him, like, Daddy, please let me help you. After I took him to court, after a time of not speaking, he came around and let me help him pay his bills. And then for a season, he didn't do it again, and then he did, and it didn't end well. But those last 10 years, financially for him is what I meant to say, those last 10 years of his life, there were seasons where we didn't speak. It was no contact. And it had to be that. Because when there was contact, the words that he would say, my goodness, they were gut-wrenching. And I just couldn't let him do that. So I'm not saying there are so many situations in our lives, and if you haven't dealt with this, I guarantee you there's somebody in your frame of reference that has or is. There are boundaries that we need to put around relationships, and I'm going to get to that at the very end, but like, don't judge others But if we're not going to be a Grinch and we're going to be like Jesus, there are some things that we need to do when we're in relationship with one another. And I told you about that that podcast that I listened to. I really would love to have an open conversation around that, because it was fascinating to listen to all these folks, and the ones that don't have contact, and then some that had stopped it but then all of a sudden had it again, and it was just fascinating to listen to. But the one thing that was a common thread between each of them is they struggled with communication. They struggled with transparency. They struggled with vulnerability. So, like, as you wrestle with boundaries, and boundaries around your time, boundaries around your emotional energy, boundaries around mental health, like, remember, say what you need. And also say what you mean. Passive aggressiveness never gets us anywhere. Say what you need, say what you mean, and mean what you say. And then see how the relationship moves forward. Love has no limits. Jesus had no limits. But he did not give everybody full-blown access to him. Love has no limits, but access does. One of the most beautiful stories that we find in the New Testament, when Jesus fed the thousands. When you start at the beginning of that story, he's out on a boat by himself trying to get away from the people. He was tired. We believe it was following the Sermon on the Mount, which actually would have occurred over a set of several days. And he was tired. The dude just wanted to rest. And so he gets out in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and he's going to the other side. And the people were so hungry for the message that he had to offer. They saw him leave, and so they don't get boats. They walk all the way around the lake to go get to him. So by the time he got to the other side, there they were. And they were hungry for so much more than just some food. They were hungry for meaning. But Jesus had to rest. Jesus had to rest, and so do we. So it's okay to put limits around your time and around your availability, especially like now in the time of cell phones. I mean, text, we're available all the time. I'm so guilty of not having boundaries, and the people closest to me suffering because one more email, one more text. It's all right to not be available 24/7. Here's what Jesus did not allow in his relationships with folks. He didn't allow himself to be manipulated or coerced. He didn't allow entitlement. He didn't allow exploitation. He didn't make it a habit to people please. He certainly didn't respond to anybody else's guilt. He did not allow himself to be emotionally hijacked. And he did not allow misaligned agendas. We could unpack each of those. They each could be a message within themselves. But I want to read them one more time, and I want you to look within at your relationships and think about them as I read them. And remember that the one that we follow, the one whose whole existence was based on loving people. These are the things that he did not allow. Manipulation, coercion, entitlement, you owe me this, exploitation, people pleasing, guilt, based access, emotional hijacking, or misaligned agendas. Boundaries matter. Your mental health, your happiness, your peace is yours. It's not anyone else's. And in a culture where we often take more than we give, it is okay to claim who you are, where you are, and what you need. Just because you say what you need, it doesn't mean you're not Jesus-like, and it certainly doesn't mean you're a Grinch. We follow one that lived to give himself away. We can do the same thing, but we can do it while we take care of ourselves first. So it's okay to have some boundaries. Let us pray. Gracious God, you show us what healthy existence looks like. You show us that we all need rest, that we can't be on 24/7. You show us that there are times in our lives where we say yes to something and it says no to other things, and no's can be holy. You show us that sometimes religious dogma and doctrine is not the most important thing that people are. So God, as we wrestle with our own boundaries this morning, especially in the craziness of this season, will you reveal to each of us in your way where we need healthy yeses and healthy nos, so that we can live into being peace-filled and joy-filled and the human beings that you have created us to be. And we ask these things in Christ's holy name. Amen. I invite you to sing and stand and sing our closing song. So I want to tell you a funny part of that podcast that I was listening to. So there was this one gentleman, he's like, I have been reunited with my daughter now after 3 years of no contact. And so they were asking him questions. They were like, well, what caused the no contact? He's like, I'm not sure. She just quit talking to me and wouldn't respond to me or her mom for 3 years. And they were like, oh, okay. So finally she reached out after 3 years and said, Dad, I need to talk to you. And so he's like, come over. And so he's like, well, why did you go no contact? And she's like, you're a helicopter parent. And what that means is you just hover and then you swoop in and you fix things. She's like, that's all you've ever done for me is like hover and then swoop in and fix. And then Oprah said, well, you know, what made her call you in the first place? He goes, oh, she's going back to college and needed some money. And I'm like, Oprah, do you not know to like ask more questions? Because she just did exactly what she accused her dad of doing. Like, that's so inconsistent. But his words were, she's my baby and I'd do anything for her. That's the one we follow. That's the God we follow, the God we worship would do anything for us, including send us one that shows us how to love and how to have limits to protect ourselves. Go in the next couple of weeks of craziness and insanity and have limits, but also give love. Go in peace. Amen.